And so that's one reason why he sent the priest back. You belong here. You need to stay here. Stay with the Ark of the Covenant. But it would be the priest who would help send word to David by their sons. And that's kind of where we take up in the story today. And so there is weeping at the Mount of Olives. It's a sad sight here, and it's the last part of chapter 15, 2 Samuel chapter 15. And in verse 30, David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too, and were weeping as they went up. Now David had been told Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, O Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. Now, can we imagine this? Who was Ahithophel? This is not going. Bathsheba's grandfather and a trusted advisor to David, but not now. Hey, Ben, this is not going. A trusted advisor to David. And now he's understanding. Now he's being told Ahithophel is with Solomon. So now we get into chapter 16, and there's just bad news after bad news that comes. And trying to think and just picture here David, this news that he keeps getting, that's just bad news over and over again. You know, in verse 32 and following, we find another trusted friend, Hushai. Let's read a little bit, verse 32. When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship, Hushai, the Archite, was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. And David said, if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, will be there. Send them to me with anything you hear. Okay, this is critical. So he's setting up a spy system, really. And this is how he's going to know what Absalom is doing. He's going to hear, word is going to come back to him through the sons of the priests. And so this is part of the unfolding story and what's happening, right here. Okay, here we go. We got it going now. All right, into chapter 16. We're not going to read as much here in chapter 16, but let's call to mind some people from the past, okay? Mephibosheth. Now, who was that? Mephibosheth, do you call? What's that? Jonathan's son, Saul's grandson, okay? And so, how did he come back into our story? You remember? How did Mephibosheth come back into our story? David sought him out. Why? Why did David seek him out? His promise to Jonathan. His promise to Jonathan, okay? And so he sought out Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth has moved there to Jerusalem with him, eats at the king's table, is how that was happening, how that was working. Somebody that was trusted by David. Who is Ziba? The servant of Mephibosheth, trusted to take care of all that had been given to Mephibosheth. So Ziba comes now to David. And what's the message from Ziba to David? Yeah, Mephibosheth has pledged his allegiance to Absalom. Okay, so this is the news that's coming to David. Is it true? It's not the truth, okay? But this is what David is hearing. And so what's David do in response? What's he say? Yeah. Ziba, all that you've been taking care of for Mephibosheth, it's yours now. Okay, there's going to be more to that story later. David's going to learn the truth. He's going to sort this out. But the point is, everything that David is hearing, the news as it comes, nothing is good. There's no good news coming to him. And so, again, just thinking about what David is having to face and what he's having to deal with now. Shimei, a relative of Saul. David is leaving city. On the way, I want to say down the mountain, I'm not sure that's the best way to say it, heading to the Jordan River. And so remember, when you leave Jerusalem and you're heading to the Jordan River, down by Jericho, down that way, you're going down in elevation a lot. Any idea how much? From Jerusalem down to the river. You remember? Like, we're talking about 3,500 feet. It's a lot. Remember? It's a lot. So David is just making his way out. They're not that far yet. They're just making their way out of the city right now. And Shimei comes up and starts cursing David. Shimei is a relative of Saul. We're in chapter 16. Let's read just a little bit. Verse 5. As King David approached Bahurim, a man of the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. He cursed. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son. You have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. Again, can we imagine? Everything that's coming to David right now is all bad news. It's all negative. It's all hard to hear. His son Absalom is coming to take the city and to take the throne. One of his most trusted counselors has gone to the other side. And now we have this crazy man who has come and who is there, and this is weird to me, pelting David and his guards even with stones. And there's this part of me that says, what are the guards doing? Why don't they stop this? But David says not to. If you read on, David said, no, don't do this. And, well, that's kind of odd. Why even, would David say? Maybe this is God's will for these things to happen. Just leave him alone. Just leave him alone, and we'll continue on. We'll do that. So Shimei accuses David of being a man of blood. Well, there's no denying that, right? And he doesn't even try to deny that. And so anyway, David's response here is just interesting to me. Again, David is searching for the Lord's will. And it's like saying, maybe this is the Lord's will, that this is happening this way. All right, my warm water and honey and lemon here. So by the time they get to the banks of the Jordan, they're just tired. Give out. It's about 17 miles from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And I believe it's about 6 miles from there down to the river. So they've gone a pretty good distance now. And as we said, it's not really just that easy of a hike. Okay, it is all downhill going down. But still, it's really steep all the way down, 3,500 feet elevation change. And so no surprise that when they get there to the fords of the Jordan, that they're just tired. And so at this point, we would think that, well, this rebellion looks like a success. It looks like it's happening and turning out just as Absalom would want it to. That this is what's happening. David is forced from Jerusalem. Absalom and his men, they arrive in town. And Ahithophel is one of his chief counselors now, Absalom, that is. And there are supporters of Absalom. We are in chapter 16. And let's read again. We're going to read verses 15 through 19. Matt, can you read for us?
But Absalom and all of the people, the men of Israel, entered Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And it came about when Hushai, the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king, long live the king." Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?" Then Hushai said to Absalom, "No, for whom the Lord, this people, and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Besides, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence." Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give your advice. What shall we do?"
Okay, who's Hushai again? What's he trying to do? He's David's spy. So Ahithophel, who was a counselor of David, but now who has turned himself to Absalom, is going to give advice to to Absalom. But Hushai is going to be the one who tries to foil that advice. And so that's his place. That is his purpose. So let's understand that here, how this story now is unfolding. And so as we look at Ahithophel giving advice to Absalom, like in verse 21 through 22, and see how this happens, how this works out. Let's read again. Let's read, Matt, again. I'm going to have you read verse 21 through 23, actually. Let's read that much.
Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself odious to your father. The hands of all who are with you will also be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. The advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one inquired of the word of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel regarded by both David and Absalom.
So what is Ahithophel's influence at this point?
Shame David.
Well, he wants to shame David, but what's his advice like to Absalom?
Sound like another time.
Like it came from God. You know, when Ahithophel speaks, this would mean something. So understand now, Hushai, who's trying to thwart whatever Ahithophel has to say, he's got to be really convincing, right? Yeah, it's going to be hard for him to kind of go against what he has to say, what Ahithophel has to say. And so the advice of Ahithophel is for Absalom to lie with his father's concubines. What is that about? Why? Well, what is the purpose of that?
It's to fulfill David's prophecy.
Okay, there's two things. This goes back to the prophecy of Nathan, which came from God. That what you have done in secret, you've done to David. There's things you've done in secret. You know, there's going to be some things that's going to happen in broad daylight now, even from your own family, in your own house. And this is the fulfillment of that prophecy. But what else is it about? Well, what does it say? If the new king moves into the palace and then takes the concubines of the previous king,
Showing the people he's really taking over.
it's like, here's the proof. I'm the one in charge. And doing so in a public way where everybody can see this was a sign, was a signal. So, all right, continuing here through chapter 16, there's a very critical moment as Absalom seeks some advice concerning how to attack David. You see, that confrontation still hasn't taken place. Turned off that thing. There has to be this confrontation. There's to be this battle between David and Absalom. Hasn't happened yet. So Absalom seems to be a little bit concerned about that. How it should happen, where it should take place. Who is he going to ask for advice? Where's this advice going to come from? Who's his counselors? Ahithophel, Hushai, right? And so he has great confidence in Ahithophel. What about Hushai? I mean, he just kind of asked some questions like, I thought you were with David. That's, you can understand he's a little bit like, whose side are you on? But Hushai has said, well, this must be the will of the Lord. You're the king. You're the one that's in Jerusalem. I'm with you now. And so Absalom asks his counselors, what should I do? And Ahithophel, his response in chapter 17, those first few verses, his response is, you better do a quick attack. You better catch David's troops when they're tired, when they're weary, when they're discouraged. Do this quick, right now. Was it good advice? Yeah. Actually, that was good advice. Actually, that's what he should have done. But Hushai had a little bit different take on this. Chapter 17 and verse 7. Chapter 17, verse 7. Hushai replied to Absalom, the advice Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They are fighters. And his spirit is a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Besides, your father's an experienced fighter. He will not spend the night with his troops. Even now, he is hidden in a cave or some other place. If he should attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldier, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt with fear, for all Israel knows that your father is a fighter, and those with him are brave. Okay, how does that sound to Absalom? Can't deny my father's a great fighter. Can't deny he knows how to handle this. Can't deny that if I get behind on this, everyone's going to hear we're falling behind. They'll lose confidence in me. And they'll want to follow David. And so Absalom's now having to really think this through. And maybe Hushai approaching it this way, maybe that's kind of playing into Absalom's, the hand of Absalom's ego a little bit. Yeah, you should send a big army. Show how much you have. Show your power and your strength. But in part, what was Hushai doing? Instead of there being a quick battle, a surprise battle that night, we're going to wait. We got to assemble the troops, send a large battle. What was Hushai trying to do? Yeah, he's delaying. He's giving time. Why? Why is he giving time? What's he want to do? Where's his spies? He's going to send his spies. He's going to wait for his spies to get word to David. That's what's going to happen. So there's a reason here that these things are happening just this way. In chapter 17 and in verse 14, Absalom and all the men of Israel said, this advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel. For the Lord has determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. There is disaster that is coming. You see, what Absalom did not know is that Hushai was loyal to David. He was on David's side. And most importantly, that God was on David's side. So Absalom decided to take Hushai's advice, taking a large army. So Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. This was the plan, remember? In part why David sent the priests back to Jerusalem. He told Hushai, no, don't come with me. You can serve me better by being in Jerusalem. Chapter 17, verse 15. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I've advised them to do this. Now send a message immediately and tell David, do not spend the night in the fords of the desert. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. So here's the word. Now that's going to make its way to David. And so their sons, Jonathan and Ahimaaz, they're waiting at a spring called En-Rogel. It's just outside of town. You can still see the city from the spring. They're just outside of town just a little bit. Verse 17. Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying in En-Rogel. A servant girl was to go and inform them, and they were to go and tell King David, for they could not risk being seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom. So the two of them left quickly and went to the house of a man in Bahurim. He had a well in his courtyard, and they climbed down into it. His wife took a covering and spread over it the well and scattered grain over it, and no one knew about it. Interesting plan, isn't it? I wonder what this looked like. And I don't know what it looked like 2,000 years ago, but I know a picture of 200 years ago shows this. I think this is fascinating. This is a picture taken in around 1857, I think is what it was. Let's look at this for a moment. And so this area here, down in here, has been identified as the area of Bahurim and the spring of En-Rogel. And so the city of Jerusalem is just here, see? Here's the area of the Temple Mount and the walls around the city. And so this is on the way to Jericho, down that Jericho road, that goes down to the fords of the Jordan. And so here's where David has already left. David has already passed all of this. He's already down by the fords. But the sons of the priests, well, they're somewhere down in this area here. And it's down that way that they're going to hide in that spring. In the well is where they're going to hide. Here's a couple of pictures from 1857 showing what was believed to be the well of En-Rogel. Again, we're seeing the city of Jerusalem up here on the hill and getting just a little bit of an idea and impression how much the elevation goes off when you start leaving the city of Jerusalem. I mean, it begins immediately and continues all the way down to Jericho. And then at Jericho, it starts flattening out some because from Jericho, it still goes down some to the Jordan. From Jericho, you can almost see the Jordan River at 6 miles, but, it's kind of down in the ravine there. But anyway, as this story is unfolding and taking place, this is where it's happening at. These pictures here just give us a little bit of insight in that. And then let's think about this. David is about to cross the river, across the Jordan River. He is going to the area of Mahanaim. All right, this is where he is running to. This is where he's being exiled to. Is this region over here? And, miles-wise, I'm not sure what that is. I meant to look it up. But we know that from Jerusalem down to the river down here, it's 20-plus miles. And that's even farther up to Mahanaim. And that's where David's going. That's where he's fleeing. But now Absalom's going to be really close behind. There's not going to be a lot of distance between them as they're going forward. And I can't help but think that Saul already knows what this feels like. I mean, there were times that when David already knows what this feels like. Because there were times when Saul was just on the other side of the mountain from him. Remember? That they were that close. And so we can see here Mahanaim, we can kind of picture, En-Rogel would have just been just outside of the city gates of Jerusalem. And in chapter 18, as we get into chapter 18, we can see that there's about to be a battle that's going to take place. In fact, let's take a moment here and let's read just a little bit in chapter 18. Let's see here. No, I'm getting too far ahead on that. I want to make this point from chapter 18. It's going to mention the forest of Ephraim. And we kind of think and wonder, well, what about the forest of Ephraim? Like, where is that at? Because when we think about David being over here in Mahanaim, Ephraim, the tribe, is over here. Ephraim is not over here. But if we think back into the book of Judges, there was a battle that took place between the soldiers and the troops of Ephraim and the Gileadites over on the other side. And if we might recall, the troops, the soldiers from Ephraim, well, they got whooped up on pretty bad. And remember that there was 40,000, more than 40,000 of those troops were killed on that side in that battle. Okay? It was not on Ephraim's territory. It was that of the Gileadites. Okay? But when the soldiers were trying to escape and were trying to get back across the river, do you remember that they were being asked a question to determine whether or not they were from Gilead or were they from Ephraim? Do you remember what they were being asked?
They were asked to say a word, which they pronounced differently.
They had to say a word. Yeah, Meshibboleth or Sibboleth. And if they mispronounced it, they were killed right there, remember? So, when this speaks of the forest of Ephraim, nobody really knows for sure. I don't know. But some have suggested that perhaps this is in the forest area where this battle took place with Ephraim sometime before. That somewhere up in here around Mahanaim, there was a forest where that battle took place and has been known for all that time as the forest of Ephraim. This is where they fought that battle and where they lost. I thought that was just kind of interesting to think about. But let's not lose the storyline. We're finishing up chapter 17. So we talked about Ahithophel's advice was not taken. Absalom listened to Hushai. And when that happened, Ahithophel knew that Absalom wasn't listening to him anymore. And so any power or authority that he had with the new king, Absalom, king but not really king, is gone. His counsel's not being sought. He can't go back to David. He's turned his back on David. He forsook David. And so, what's Ahithophel's future? What happens? He kills himself. Because he's just saying, what have I got to live for? Absalom does not hold me in regard. I turned my back on David. I can't go back there. And he must be thinking, I might as well just kill myself because at some point, Absalom's probably going to do that anyway. Or he knows that David is going to do that when he comes back to Jerusalem. So David goes on to the city of Mahanaim. And there were supporters that came out to meet him there. Interesting again, that David has found supporters all along the way. There are those who met him outside the city gates. There are those who traveled with him. There are those who meet him now at the ford of the Jordan. Let's read a little bit here in chapter 17. And we're going to start at verse 23 here about Ahithophel. When Ahithophel saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house in his hometown. He put his house in order, and then he hanged himself. So he died and was buried in his father's tomb. Verse 24. David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Absalom had appointed Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Amasa is the son of a man named Jether, an Israelite who married Abigail and the daughter of the son. Verse 27. When David came to Mahanaim, Sobi, son of Nahash, from Reba, from the Ammonites, and Makir, son of Amiel, from Lobar, and Barzillai, remember this name, the Gileadite from Rogelim, brought bedding and bowls and articles of pottery. They also brought wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep and cheese from cows, and milk for David and his people to eat. For they said, these people have become hungry and tired and thirsty. This chapter ends, I think, in a very encouraging way, where David is reminded again that there are those who are willing to follow him. There are those who love him. There are provisions that are coming to him. Maybe even he can see and think, God is caring for me and those who are working with me. It's interesting just how much was made as far as provisions that came out, to care for him and those with him. But we pause here in the storyline for a moment. We may not get very far on this. We've looked at some of the Psalms along the way. And in fact, I do want to spend a little time on this first thing on Wednesday night, Psalm 3. Most believe that this would be the period of time where Psalm 3 is written. David is, again, at a very low point in his life. Not really knowing the future and what's going to happen here going forward. But some things are not looking real good. Absalom is not far behind. And David is going to remember this period of time. I'm not saying necessarily he wrote it at this very moment. But at least when he wrote it, perhaps these are some of the things that he was thinking about, some things that were in his mind. Now, we've got a minute or so, and that's about all. Some closing thoughts and comments. Tell me some things that stick out in your mind. Tell me some things from this lesson today that we need to kind of work with and remember. What comes to your mind?
How little God is acknowledged through this. A lot of intrigue, a lot of espionage, a lot of worldly wisdom goes into play, allegiances, loyalties, whatever that is. And we know that God, through Nathan, said these things are going to happen, but there wasn't a lot of, until the end of 18, there's not going to be a lot of God delivering, God input here.
Or David petitioning God.
Yes, exactly.
Now, don't you wonder about that? I mean, earlier we read, David said, well, perhaps this is God's will. There's that acknowledgement, okay? But it's like, why, as David has done at times in the past, why didn't he just stop and petition God, pray to him, what's best, what should I do? You wonder about that a little bit. Anything else? What else stands out? Yes, Lance.
Whenever they brought the news that Absalom might lay with this conflict, I think David would have known that this is what my punishment is for Absalom.
Yeah.
But even with all this encouragement, I think that he knows this is God's punishment, but he still knows that God cares.
Yeah, okay.
Even throughout that.
I mean, David would know and understand that this is part of what the prophet had foretold, and that, with Absalom laying with David's concubines, it's like, what can David say about that? And he knows why that took place. That was all because of his sin prior. What can David say against that? Nothing really. But don't you know that still has to be weighing on his mind, So, interesting story as it unfolds. I like the way Matt says it's full of intrigue and espionage. There is all of that is happening here. But not to lose the sight of the big picture. That God's will is still at play. The story isn't done. And it's going to finish up now pretty quick as far as Absalom goes. But try to be in the head of David just a little bit and to wonder and to think about what all's going through his mind right now. And what would we be thinking? And how would we respond? And we can get a little critical about David. Why doesn't he inquire of God? Well, why don't we? And sometimes that we need to do that, and we don't. Can we learn lessons from that? And it seems odd on one hand that from these stories of so long ago that we have nothing to do with, that we can learn lessons that apply to us. Makes us think about some things, doesn't it? I hope that's helpful. Thank you for participating well today. God willing, Wednesday night we start with Psalm 3, and then we continue at chapter 18. Thank you.